Hi, everybody, and welcome to the 2024 HighFlex Collaborative Conference. This is my HighFlex presentation, Making College Courses Flexible, Re-envisioning Flexibility Down to the Activities and Course Materials. I'm Kevin Kelly from San Francisco State University, and I'm modeling a quick and dirty type presentation that we hope our instructors do so that when students are asked to make presentations, they don't feel like they have to be perfect. On we go. So most of us are familiar with HighFlex and the fact that it combines multiple places and times in the definition that Brian Beatty provided in his book and in the work he's been doing for many years. It allows us to provide students with the flexibility of choosing when and where they participate in each class meeting. But this grid here is designed to show that there are more types of flexibility than just HighFlex. And so whatever type of multimodality you're offering to your students, we know that some folks are defining HighFlex in different ways and might not use asynchronous components or might not use remote video conference, what have you. Wanted to keep it in context that flexible course delivery can be bigger than just HighFlex. And that got me to thinking that the course delivery method is applied to the big box around the course. But what if we were to break that apart and look at courses in a very granular way and look at our outcomes, the different assessment strategies, the different engagement activities we ask students to complete or participate in, and even how do they review content? Are we providing that same sense of flexibility when we ask students to participate in these courses and supporting them if they choose to be in a flexible format but don't know how to be successful? Those are the questions that I'm going to help answer today. So we start with the core principles, again, that Dr. Brian Beatty put out in his work, the fact that learners have a choice in how they participate, the fact that we provide equivalent experiences no matter which choice students make, the fact that we try to use reusable activities, materials, assessments, and what have you, and then making things accessible for students with disabilities, but also for students who might need alternative formats just because they're commuting on a bus or need to put their kids to bed and want to listen to a lecture while they wash the dishes after dinner. So let's start with, what does it mean to make our outcomes more flexible? If we think about some of the limiting factors, the parameters that we squeeze into outcomes, we can look at different factors that we can maybe either remove or change so that we can increase the flexibility of our outcomes. For example, when are students required to demonstrate achievement of that outcome? Or where are they required to do it? How long do they have to complete the work? What formats can students use to show that they've met the learning outcomes? What choice do students have? What options do they have in terms of showing that achievement? And then are they doing this alone, or are they doing this with multiple people as part of a small group? So all these different things can either decrease or increase the flexibility depending on how we write those outcomes. Other factors we want to take into consideration is who our students are. Are they students with that they're the first generation in their family to go to college? If so, are we making assumptions about what they know when we write our outcomes? Do we have students with diverse abilities in our classes? So do our outcomes consider accessibility? Are they able to perform all the same tasks in the same ways or equivalent ways? Are we facing non-traditional or returning students that might need specific technology skills or help providing the pathway to complete those assignments? Are we working with any non-native English speakers that would not understand particular jargon or language that we have in our outcomes? And last, international students. Are we making cultural references, and are our outcomes considering global perspectives? So all those are different lenses through which we can look at our outcomes. That in the slide before bring us to some examples of what it's like to revise our outcomes to make them more flexible. I'm only going to go through one right now because I want to keep this video short, but you have access to these slides and I'll make sure you have the link at the end. So let's take a look at this first one here. The outcome that was originally written for the first draft of your research paper, you'll include an evaluation of each source used to support your argument. Then when we look through all those different factors and review that outcome, we can see that that outcome assumes that all students, including first-generation students, know how to evaluate sources used to support an argument. So we might revise that outcome and the whole activity to boot with, along with the first draft of your research paper, you will fill out a checklist of evaluation questions for each source you use to support your argument. So we're supporting students in completing the activity and not assuming that they know what it means. This last one, just really quickly, you'll write a reflective essay about using metacognitive strategies described in this course. That's my class. I teach a class called How to Learn with Your Mobile Device that teaches students how to learn with technology. But soon after I wrote this outcome, I realized that most students don't know what metacognition is before they've taken my class. So I rewrote the outcome. After applying strategies designed to improve your learning, you'll write an essay that examines your personal experiences as a learner. All right. So now what does it mean to make assessment more flexible? Well, again, looking at some of those factors, is there a start and end date and time? Is there a specific duration they have? Are you asking them to complete assessments, whether they be tests or essays or lab experiments? Are they supposed to do those in a particular place? Are they be able to turn in different formats? We can write rubrics that will allow students to turn things in as an essay, as a video clip, as long as we set up the criteria to support that. And how many attempts or discussion replies or drafts do they get before they are considered done? Finally, what are we asking students to do and what are we grading? So having strong rubric criteria and expectations, and again, back to that idea of student choice. One thing that really makes it possible to increase flexibility at different levels, at the beginning, you might have an essay question. So you can see the smallest circle in the center. Students have a choice of which questions to answer. They're determining between 1, 2, or 3 different questions that all show that they've met the same outcome. Then you might give them a choice of turning something in a different format. Again, an essay, an infographic, a video, or a presentation. And then last, maybe they have a choice of even different activities that all show that they reach different outcomes. So you have different levels of flexibility. Some are easier to perform than others for the instructor. Some are more interesting to the students, but again, providing that flexibility is an aspect of assessment that we often don't consider. So when we want to support students with flexible assessment, especially in a high flex course, how are students tracking their own progress if they're able to participate in a different way for each class session? Are we involving students in creating rubrics or test questions? Are we giving them self-assessment opportunities so they can practice before they get to the actual assessment? And are we clarifying our expectations? And one way we can do that is to use the transparent assignment template, either for instructions for an assessment period, for an assignment they're going to turn in, and as we'll talk about later, you might even use it for content review. And then we can even create flexibility within assessment environments. We can provide feedback in different ways. As instructors or instructional designers, we can advocate for written feedback, video feedback, using that rubric, collecting student feedback about what they're experiencing before, during, or after the assessment experience, and then using the technology settings to increase flexibility, whether you're using a quiz or a discussion or assignment in a learning management system. There are settings related to logistics, the student experience, workflow, and what have you, that you can modify that actually increase the flexibility in how students can complete things. On the flexible engagement side, we'll take a look at the different phases of engagement where you're planning for your class activities before the class session even begins, setting up before a particular activity and a live class session. What are you doing as you facilitate that activity, and how do we summarize it and wrap it up? And then when we talk about the expectations, again, I'll lean on that transparent assignment template, but are we providing deadlines that let students know, hey, you might be working at different times, but everybody has to turn this in by Thursday? Are there any tech tutorials that you can provide for students to be able to complete the activity if they don't know how to use the technology? Or are there people that they can talk to, a tutor or a writing guide or a librarian that they might need to interact with? And what other information do they need? Sometimes helping students engage with classmates in a class that has multiple modalities is a critical part for them to feel like they're part of a community. So the ask three before me paradigm asks students to create a contact list with at least 3 classmates they can get in touch with by text or email. Having back channels like Slack or Teams or some other pathway for students to connect with one another synchronously or asynchronously. Some people will create a course cafe, a discussion forum where students can talk about non-academic topics and have that sense of community with students outside of the course context. And then creating asynchronous activities where the in-person students and the remote students and the asynchronous students all get to mix in one space. Using the same tool for that often helps. And so one thing that I promote, and I've got a Google Doc that is linked from this presentation here, is a run of show tool where you're actually planning out your activities in the live setting and the asynchronous setting so that students know what's expected. You're even going to want to talk to them. Hey, if you're completing this activity in person, here's what I want you to do. Work in your small groups. If you're watching remotely via Zoom, you're going to participate in this way. And you folks who are watching the recording, I want you to press pause, go do something and come back and press play again, and we'll talk about it. So these run of show documents, it's like you're creating a conference like the collaborative HyFlex conference, where you're planning it out and making sure everybody knows where to be and what to do. When it comes to content review, that's something that we often just read these pages, read these chapters, read these articles, and then we stop there. But we want to think about what does it mean for students to actually consume the content for a course, whether it be a recorded lecture, whether it be something that they're going to read, some external thing that you found that you want them to see in advance. But you can make sure that they can follow universal design for learning principles and provide those things in different formats. Whether it's this video that I'm creating, my Zoom allows me to save it as a video, as an audio clip, and as the recorded transcript. So I've got 3 different formats producing one particular lecture. Saving text as audio. Some instructors will read the journal articles. They ask students to read and record themselves doing it. Michael Wesch from Kansas State is someone that I often refer to when I talk about this. But if you don't have the time to record yourself reading a journal article, you can also point students to text-to-speech tools that will read it for them so that they can benefit from that modality. Setting up content review expectations, whether or not it's required or optional, how much of the content they should review, and when you're going to ask students to use that information in conversations, in activities, and so on. All these things are important to make sure that they know upfront. And then how about in these asynchronous or multimodal course activities, creating spaces for students to interact with one another around the content review. Hypothesis and eMargin are tools that allow us to create collaborative content review experiences, but you can also do that with audio and video, depending on what your class is designed to do. It's a way for us to make sure students are not alone in the space of reviewing the content for the course, but have options to interact with their peers. We can also think about what strategies do we use when we lecture or provide visual content for students, whether it be simultaneous release, it's released in a theater and on HBO Max at the same time. Is it more like the seat back TVs on an airplane where everybody gets their own version using tools like Nearpod to basically push the slides to synchronous and asynchronous learners alike? Are we recording our lecture ahead of time in a flipped methodology, or are we allowing students to review at their own pace? that's what I have for us today, and I'm looking forward to our real-time discussion. You're welcome to contact me, and I hope you enjoy the conference.